what are the true energy savings for additional insulation, replacing windows, duct sealing, and air sealing? And when I was researching this, I did think it was interesting with some of the information I came up with. So there we go. The EPA has done some calculations. They've come up with what a standard house is, and I'll explain what that is in a second. But they're suggesting that you can save up to 20% on heating and cooling with additional insulation. Similar percentages with replacing your windows, duct sealing, air sealing. And then it's somewhat dependent on the climate that you live in. And hold on, there we go. So establishing what a typical US existing house is, they say it's 1,700 square feet of conditioned space, 15% window to floor area ratio, 23% total system duct leakage, 4 bedrooms, stick built, and what they're suggesting is that if you do air sealing and add insulation, that your estimated savings are going to be somewhere around $165 per month on your energy costs. So it gives you a sense of what this graph might look like. This is not an actual graph, but I'll get into that in a second, where your initial capital outlay is going to be insulation, air sealing, replacement windows, and those numbers could be anywhere from $10,000 on the low end to $26,000 on the high end. So if you see on our chart here, lumping attic air sealing and insulation together and not really accounting for a typical home, but just sort of spreading it out, you could maybe get that work done for less than $2,000. It may cost you up to $6,500. Replacement windows can be anywhere from $500 to $1,000 or even more. And so we'll guesstimate somewhere between $9,000 and $20,000. And so your total capital outlay on the front end to energy improve your house is going to be somewhere between $10,000 and $26,000. Well, the EPA estimate of 15% per year or $165 per month, on the high end, it's going to take you 35 years to recoup that. And on the low end, it's going to take you 14 years. So when people think about, you know, how much is this going to save me? The reality is you have to live in your house a really long time for it to pay for itself. Now, there'll be comfort, there'll be, you know, use, if you got new windows, they're going to work better. But when your clients ask you, well, how much is this going to save me? The real answer is it depends on how long you're going to live in the house. And if they live there the statistical 5 to 7 years, spending money on energy efficiency improvements doesn't really make sense. They're never going to take these old houses and make them LEED certified, platinum award-winning, you know, energy efficient houses. So some of that is do it if you want to. What is the true cost of being a self-employed home inspector? So, depending on where you are, you got training, the home inspector exam, licensing, your basic toolkit, software, E&O if you go that route, starting a corporation, whatever sort of association fees you might have. My own experience 20 years ago was I took 3 credit cards and maxed them out and spent about $30,000 starting my business. And that seems to be sort of in line with what this number is. We were just talking that when I started, I had a residential contracting business that devolved into a handyman business, and I was doing that at the same time that I was doing inspections, and I did double for about a year. My first year I did like 31 inspections, but I still had my handyman business going. And then thankfully the next year I did 100 and some inspections, and then the year after that I got up to about 250, 300, and I was able to jettison the handyman business. But if you're starting out, it's going to be $30,000 at least. Wellman.
You're missing marketing, website, SEO, a lot of that. So there's the promotion costs as well.
Absolutely. I printed up 10,000 pamphlets and I never gave away one. What is your basic philosophy of home inspection? This is what Hollis had to say. See if I can bring it up. So Hollis says that he's under the assumption that his role is to inform the home purchaser about their decision. Agents refer me and clients hire me because they are involved in a home purchase. Client is trying to buy a house. The agent is trying to help them find a house. They've already found the house that they think that might be the right one, and so they just want me to help them make sure it is the right one and let them know about any defects. At a minimum, they have to consider the implications of whatever he tells them, or they can choose to ignore it. Because he respects other people's time, he tries to include information that is relevant and pertinent to that decision. And he sort of doesn't include a bunch of other stuff. He's begun to think that the Generation Z is used to having information at its fingertips. They're always wanting to just parse the data. Everything you need and nothing you don't, as far as like what information he might provide. Does that sound like a reasonable synopsis?
That sounds just like me.
My philosophy is somewhat different. I give people way too much information. My reports are way too long, and I spend way too much time on the inspection and writing the reports. But for reasons I don't quite understand, people have gravitated towards that, and so I get a lot of business in that realm. So I tell people everything they need to know about the house, how to turn the lights on, how to get the landscape lights to work, how to light the fireplace, where the nearest fire hydrant is, whatever I can think of. That's my philosophy. This is one I picked up. So the inspector should not be expected to report on minor cosmetic items. I report on cosmetic items. Determine the remaining lifespan of components. I give people an idea of how much life is left and stuff. Quote exact cost for repairs. I give estimates all the time. Perform technically exhaustive inspections. I do technically exhaustive inspections. Perform punch lists on new construction. That's like my bread and butter right now. I do at least one new construction a week, and I make the giant big blue tape punch list for it. Put themselves in dangerous, unsafe situations. I climb on every roof, so sometimes people think that's maybe not wise. I definitely don't do this. Advise on whether or not the property should be purchased. People always ask me, oh, should we buy this house? My response is sometimes I don't see any reason not to buy the house. So if you're already interested in a house like this, go for it. I think twice I've stopped an inspection and told people they just shouldn't buy the house. Once was when there was termites in the attic. Sometimes people also say, what's the biggest issue with the house? And I'll also say the mortgage. Turn on any utility that is not turned on at the time of inspection, gas and water. I'd do that. It depends on the situation. I will definitely assess whether or not I think there's significant risk associated with that. I'm not going to turn on the water and have it come out everywhere. But I will turn on the gas. I've got a couple of gaskets. I'll take the plug out of the meter and get it running and see what's what, and then put it all back the way it was. Mainly so my client can get as much information as possible. If you can't test the water heater, the furnace, the cooktop, the fireplace, the grill, what do they need me for?
But you said you turn on the gas, you'll open up the gas, you turn the gas on,
Yes.
and you'll open up,
I'll pull the meter apart, take the cap out, stick a gasket back in there.
you don't really.
Yeah.
You're not licensed to do that, no?
The guy that comes and hooks up the meter isn't licensed to do it.
You really, you net that now.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm comfortable. I got a big, thick neck. What?
Sorry, Alan, you get stupid.
No, not at all. I mean, I'm providing a service for my clients that they rely on me for. That may be. I'm embarrassed to tell you what my average inspection fee is based on that approach.
How much? 250.
I'm not gonna tell you.
How much?
So a technically exhaustive inspection is a bad thing. This is a classic picture. It's like from the 30s, I think. There's numbers that are associated with all of those things. Essentially each item being a specific part of the house. I'm open to suggestions on this. So do you have any tips on how to speed up an on-site inspection without compromising quality?
Make sure the grandchildren don't show up.
Yeah, there you go. So prioritize key areas with well-structured checklists, leverage technology like digital forms and mobile apps for data collection, train inspectors thoroughly, delegate tasks where possible, develop a comprehensive yet focused checklist tailored to the specific site and inspection type. So you might have condo checklists, new house checklists, old house checklists, digital tools, either web-based platforms, just trying to eliminate manual data entry, prioritize high-risk areas and focus on those, risk-based sampling, so where appropriate, you know, don't test every outlet, don't test every door and window. Say it again?
Just routine that you have, like, you know, you're doing the same thing with a process.
Yes, have a process. Don't deviate from it. Sometimes I have a process for the way I go through a house, and occasionally, because of clients or the conditions in the house or homeowners, I have to do it slightly differently, and it always messes me up. Why do some inspectors include methods and facilities in their reports that are beyond the standard scope of the ASHI and standard? Does this open them up to liability for which they are not insured? Is this what you're referring to? I mean, we've talked about it before. So, you know, if you inspect to the standard and you don't go any further, you're essentially inspecting to the minimum requirements. So are you providing a minimum inspection? I think we're all afforded the opportunities at various times during our inspections to go beyond the standard and provide additional information for our clients. It's the matter of what you feel comfortable with. I've only been sued once, and that was one of my inspectors, and we got sued for termites. And you might say, well, why were you sued for termites? And the answer was everybody was thrown into the pile for termites. So I'm comfortable with providing the information that I do. I think going beyond the standard is essential, because if you're just inspecting to the standard, you're providing a minimum service, and you can't command a high fee with a minimum service. Who carries workman's comp when they have 0 employees? I do. And the primary reason is that oftentimes some of the jobs you'll do, they require you to have workman's comp regardless of the situation. They want to just know that you have it. Now, the reality is you can't make a claim. You know, as the principal, they're not going to pay on the workman's comp, but that's just the way it works. Some people have what's called a ghost policy. Is anybody familiar with ghost policies? I didn't really know much about it. It's a policy in name only. You can demonstrate that you have coverage. It doesn't cost very much, but it's also not going to pay out anything. So a ghost policy is essentially provides no real workers' comp. It just excludes the business owner and does not cover any employees since there are none. It's used for compliance. Due to not covering anyone, a ghost policy typically has a very low premium.
How much you guys pay for?
I'd have to look,
Ours is a couple hundred a
yeah,
year.
it's, I mean, it's rolled into all my other insurance, so.
That's all?
Why do home inspectors and even the training we attend constantly go well beyond the ASHI standards? Why do these conferences and these sessions go beyond the ASHI standards? The standard is what we should train to. Separate identified training could be available for those that like rabbit holes. I'm a seasoned home inspector and I understand what is being taught, but new home inspectors may be confused and think that's what they should be doing. My going above the standard so often, we are pushing the expectations of the clients where they may think a home inspector not testing resistance in an HVAC system or testing electrical receptacles for voltage drop is how a home inspection should be done. I mean, I think the reason why we do some of the seminars and classes the way we do is because it gets boring, right? I mean, if you listen to the same intro to plumbing seminar over and over and over again, it gets a little tedious. And while new inspectors need, you know, whatever information we can provide to them, I, for one, want to go to seminars where there's something interesting to listen to and something to learn. I don't know that we're at risk of having the clients think they're getting something they're not. But it's the same sort of thing. The standard is the minimum. We shouldn't strive for the minimum. We should strive for something better than that. Is it legal to use a drone near an airport? No. Is there a way to get a waiver, permission, or other workaround? Does anybody here fly a drone? There's a drone. So you may know more about this than I do.
Yeah,
And
you
it's,
can fly near the airport, you can get something called Atlantic authorization, and you can do it with software on your phone. But you can't fly directly near the airport, but you're not supposed to fly within 5 miles. But usually you can fly within 4 miles, or 3 miles, or even 2 miles with a waiver.
But you need a pilot's license.
Yes.
To use it commercially, you need a pilot's license.
Right.
So if you have a drone and you don't have a pilot's license, if you use it for anything commercial at all,
Right.
then you are liable for fines if you don't have a pilot's license. You can use it, you know, for under 250 grams for personal use, you don't need registration or licensing, but the minute you make money with it, you know, you have to have a pilot's license.
And even if you don't make direct money, but if you're doing a job and you use it at that job,
Yep.
that's enough.
Mr. Troxel.
Just for everybody's information about the rule that the FAA made, the Maryland Commission of Home Inspectors passed some regulations that inspectors must comply with state, federal, and
Local.
laws or something like that, directly for this reason. So don't get caught in Maryland using a drone without a license.
Right.
Yep.
Or the state inspection is going to be,
They're
action
looking-
might be taken against your license.
They're looking for someone to hang.
And it's not just airports,
No.
it's hospitals, police stations.
Government building.
There's a couple of interesting websites that have all the sites. And in the Washington DC area, Montgomery County, Crater County, drones can't take off.
Can't fly within 30 miles of the president. When the president travels, they put out no fly zones. You can't travel when he's in Delaware. You can't do it when he's at Camp David. You can't fly within 30 miles of the president at any time.
How do you test a garage door opener? Hollis and I had this discussion and it was based on, I think, the spring seminar where there was talk about a 2x4 and what the proper way of testing a garage door is. Avi, do you have something to share with the group? So the Commercial Overhead Door Association, which has a different name, the Commercial and Residential Garage Door. They have a whole system for checklists and how to properly inspect a garage door. And actually in the garage door manufacturer's instructions, they talk about using a 2x4 to test it. Hollis showed me a trick with his flashlight, and I started doing that. Usually I was doing the hand jerk test, and depending on who's doing it, you know, me or one of my guys, you know, we have different resistance tolerances, and you definitely can feel the thing coming off its tracks if you try hard enough. Jim, please wait while Bob shares us information, and then I'll get to you. Bob had his hand up first.
The 2x4 is actually an Underwriter Laboratory standard, UL 236. It is the only recommended, or it's the only accepted test method for the insurance industry. So if you are using the proper method, it's called out in the brochure, you're protected under that. There used to be 3 tests. There was the door, you know, like you said, by your hand, breaking the light beam, and then doing the 2x4. Put your hand under the garage door and try to stop it, if you can, was removed by the insurance industry because it's not repeatable. The only tests that are accepted by the insurance industry are repeatable and documentable, which is the 2x4 on the ground and breaking the light beam.
Jim, did you have something you'd like to share with the group?
Yeah, the jerk test with your hand, problem with that, it's not that it's just not repeatable. Doors at the wrong angle, unless your hand is way down where the 2x4 is. When the door's at the wrong angle, that's when you break it.
Sort of in the the mid-range of the articulation. Mark,
With a 2x4 or some object, flashlight, I've heard the argument about, that the door can get damaged. Like, if it actually continues to go, there's nothing stopping it by trying to engage it a little bit higher off the ground, so you could then potentially, you know, especially one of those lightweight aluminum doors or an old wooden one that's half decrepit, could kink.
there's an experienced garage door breaker right here. Were you about to add something, or?
I was gonna say that in my experience was that I was trained to do it like this, right? You catch it right here and you hold up. And, I didn't know how hard to hold. So I discovered that I could make them all reverse if I held hard enough. I was strong enough to make it reverse. The mechanism works. However, if you hold on hard enough and it doesn't work very well, the door comes off the track, and then you're getting your tools out and fix it. So I thought that I was being very conscientious, and I kept on doing what I thought was right. And then I found myself in a group discussion with 7 home inspectors. And I just simply asked, how do you do it? This is early in my career. I said, how do you do it? And they all said, well, I either do it this way, I do it this way, or I do it this way. One of the 3. They're all grabbing it with their hands somehow. And then I went around the room, I said, so how many do you fail? How many do you fail? How many do you fail? Percentage wise. And by the time I'd gotten 7 people, I had everything from 10/90 to 90/10, some 40/60s and some 60/40s, but it was all over the map. It was meaningless information. So I read the manual. The manual says put a 2x4 on the floor. I carried a 2x2 with me for a while until I realized that my flashlight is 1.5 inches in diameter. Problem solved. Since I started that, and it's probably now 10,000 garage doors I've tested that way, I've never damaged one. I damaged 3 doors in the first 2 years of my career until I changed.
And you bought 50 new flashlights, right?
No, this flashlights. You know, I did put a plastic screwdriver up at one time, just like that.
Sean,
The Door and Access System Manufacturers Association, DASMA,
yes.
has a very good standard. There you go. Sorry.
That's all right. No, not at all. So Sean is describing this, which is the official checklist for inspecting overhead doors. And while there's some stuff on here we're not gonna do, there is some really good information. If you want to incorporate that into your inspection protocol, and you get to the end and it specifically says 2x4 laid flat for the reverse mechanism. To answer your question, Mark, you're concerned that it's gonna bend around it, or?
I mean, that's just one thing that I've heard.
Right, but if it's just gonna keep going and it's only an inch off the threshold point, it's, right. Doesn't have that much,
Or you put it in a corner and then it just, that won't kick it.
yeah, I would try the middle.
Yeah.
I mean, cause what I tell my students is that if you follow the accepted testing protocol and the door breaks, that's failed under testing.
Yes,
So it's not, you didn't do really anything that a normal person wouldn't have done. It just happened to be the door's time to fail.
you're still gonna be in the discussion about paying for it.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna say that I use my hands and I don't.
So do I.
Oh, I know, I'll leave. But it's also like, and I actually do usually the reach back, the backhand. Sometimes it's if I get to it fast enough. But I'm not trying to stop it. I'm trying to see, it should reverse with minimal effort, right? If I get to a point where it's beyond the minimal effort, I just let it go and I say, this needs to be adjusted. Like, it's just a safety thing. It's not a function thing necessarily. So that's where I'm.
You'll
If
sometimes,
it's dirty,
you'll
yeah.
sometimes get them at the opposite where it's too sensitive and every time it hits, it reverses. You gotta hold the button down to get it to stop.
Well, right, but you don't even use your hand
Yeah.
for that one, so. Anyway.
How often do people see this? I see that all the time.
Photo eye sensors are pop.
Over here on the left. Just the photo eyes like somewhere not related, not doing what they're supposed to do.
With the extension cord, that runs.
Yeah.
Where am I?
Yeah.
And it's a GFI. Or a light bulb converter, like with the bulb.
Oh, yeah.
All right, let me catch up with myself. Do you inspect radon mitigation systems as part of your general home inspection? If so, what do you look for? Definitely, right? If a house has a mitigation system, you better sure as shit say that it has one. You should be able to describe what it does. You should check to see if it's labeled properly. You should check to see if the manometer is offset. That the fan is, hardwired and on its own dedicated circuit, that it has a switch. One thing that I find a lot with new construction is that the builders aren't aware of the requirement that all new construction actually needs a variety of passive, I guess, radon system components. And that includes an outlet in the attic, so like the junction box there. So if a system needs to be installed, there's supposed to be a dedicated receptacle next to the pipe in the attic. That pipe is supposed to be labeled on every floor wherever it's visible. It's also supposed to go through the roof. I've had some new construction guys say, oh, we never run it through the roof. And I'm like, well, Appendix F says it's got to run through the roof.
Alan?
Yes.
National law has just been updated to require regular inspections of radon mitigation systems. A friend of mine is a certified radon person up in New York, and she said that these new rules are coming down for that systems have to be inspected by certified radon system inspectors. I have to get details about that. That's Andy Warren.
Well, that would be interesting. We're all familiar with the sort of spaceship fan, typical for mitigation systems. I had seen this and didn't understand it when I saw it, and then I looked it up, that you can also use like a heat recovery ventilator or an energy recovery ventilator in a sidewall and effectively mitigate radon that way, and that's an approved method. So if for some reason you can't put in a traditional subslab depressurization system, you can put in essentially a dedicated blower that's just doing an air exchange and constantly making negative pressure in the space you're trying to mitigate.
But doesn't it have to exhaust above the gutter line?
For the HRV, they'll let it go right out the side. It, I was equally confused, but it is an approved method. Right. This just goes over a variety of techniques, how they work. ASHI does have a standard for inspecting radon systems. I've incorporated most of it into my report writing software so that I hit all the boxes. But it is a useful tool. It's online at the ASHI. And then this is the appendix I was talking about. There's a couple of items from that, but essentially, you know, if you've got an active system, the sump pipe needs to be sealed, needs to be labeled, needs to have accessibility, right? They'll say, oh yeah, the radon pipe runs up in the attic and there's no possible way to get to where that pipe is. At that point, it's like, okay, I guess we'll put the fan on the roof, which is where mine is. No, it cannot. In fact, here's a couple of examples of these are real, like this one was done by the contractor. This one was done by a professional abatement company, right? I mean, it's got all the things on it. And it's very clearly underneath habitable space that's above it. The concern is that you don't know if the gasket's going to be sealed and you could just be pumping radon into the livable space. So it either needs to go on the attic or on the outside. The county's not looking at active depressurization systems as they're installed. The county's not actually looking at radon systems.
All those homes have it, you know, being built brand new.
Yes.
And they're wrong.
They're wrong.
Wrong.
The fan is inside?
Yeah.
And it's wrong.
Yeah,
Right
that's,
to the sump pump, it goes from the sump pump.
yeah, the pipe is there and the manometer is there, but the fan should not be there.
And it's right there.
And it's wrong.
Deadly.
I've only seen that once in my career.
Oh, I've
Once
seen it,
where
we
was
see about half a
Like this,
dozen
where it's in
times,
the basement.
half a dozen times.
Shouldn't be that way.
Most of them were homeowner installed after they got a test.
There's also green apparently. I've never seen green. I usually see red and blue. There's also, there you go, yellow. So-
By the way, if you have any questions about whether the system is working, if you go outside and you don't hear the fan, but the manometer shows unequal, check the open end of the manometer, make sure they haven't cheated by putting a wad of wax or something. We've seen it once where they tried to cheat by plugging the open end of the manometer to make it look like it was an unequal level, but it wasn't.
I've seen the opposite too, where the little sealant around it isn't effective, and so it was showing even, but the fan was running. It's just that the tube going into the pipe was leaking. So on the right is a radon vent pipe not going through the roof. On the left is a vent pipe, but there's no accessible receptacle to plug it in. What is an acceptable number and size of cracks in a newly poured concrete slab? 4. 7. 0. Cracks like this are not in the foundation, right? That's just the slab. That's the basement floor. It's not really a component of the house or the foundation. Cracks like this are pretty typical. If they had some control joints, they might have been able to get, you know, some work around there. You know, they've got this dog leg here that's probably causing some of that. This cracked within the first 2 or 3 weeks after it got poured. Is it a big deal? No. Are new homeowners going to be freaked out about it? Yes. They're going to ask that the builder seal it, fix it, do something. You can caulk it, I guess, if that makes you feel better.
Biggest implication is water intrusion from under the slab and radon.
I would say radon would be,
New home that has a vapor barrier below that slab. Any house built in this area is gonna have it.
Yeah.
For that status, it has to be inspected.
Right, except you think the gravel on top of it is putting any gas in it?
Would be below that vapor barrier.
Well, sorry,
I pour concrete almost every day.
I know you do.
The reason that concrete's cracked right there is because it's in a corner. Anytime you have a corner, it's gonna crack.
Salt pumps, pilings, hose.
Well, the place should have diamonds.
Yeah.
So this is a slab being poured. Those guys are holding tools, but around this pipe, and that's either a sump pump circular back there or this outside corner right here, it's definitely gonna crack in those spots. Types of cracking, the concrete people have a whole system, plastic settlement, thermal contraction, long-term drying, crazing, corrosion from rebar. There's a variety of reasons. Concrete gets hard and it cracks, right? That's pretty much a given. Does main,
Never stops getting hard. Continuously,
And it always is shrinking.
asphalt's a liquid also.
talking about that.
Does manufactured stone veneer or natural stone veneer that is installed over concrete or block foundation walls need to have a weep system? No. It's not a bad idea, but if you put a weep system below grade, what's it really doing? What is the sulfur odor in bathrooms and kitchens and what can be done about it? Sometimes it's a, the washer definitely always has funk in it. Sometimes it can be an open sewer vent. But I think in this case, we're talking about on the hot water side, there's a bacteria that can grow in a water heater. That definitely gives off that sulfur smell. The builders will say, we'll just flush it out. That sometimes works. Sometimes the anode rod needs to be replaced. Sometimes you just need a new water heater. And you'll see it in vacant homes, properties that have been sitting there for a while without any water running through it. And it'll be on the hot side, not the cold side. What can be done about it? Replace the water heater. That's the easiest one.
Some